I am June Merritt, 69, and for 50 years, this cedar-shingled home by the bay in Annapolis has been my anchor. I was a school librarian, married to Rob, who rebuilt these walls with his own hands. Every board carries his touch, every nail still remembers his patience. This house is not just wood and paint. It is birthdays, graduations, storms survived, and mornings filled with the smell of coffee. That Saturday morning started like many others. The bell on the porch rang with the breeze, a sound that always felt like a greeting from the past. I brewed coffee the same way I had since Rob bought our old percolator and set out toast and jam. Evan, my only son, shuffled in wearing his new sports hoodie, while Sloane, polished as ever, glided in behind him. The light from the bay slipped across the kitchen table, highlighting every wrinkle in the wood we had refinished decades ago. I could tell something was coming. Sloane kept tapping her manicured fingers on her glass, her smile too controlled, too careful. Evan cleared his throat as if rehearsing. When he spoke, it was gentle at first. "Mom, maybe it's time you found your own place." The words floated across the table and landed heavy in my chest. Sloane picked up quickly, her voice sweet but sharp. "We've been thinking the house could use a redesign, something fresh, something modern." She gestured at the cabinets Rob had built himself, the ones I polished every spring. I asked steady as I could where they were thinking of moving. She laughed lightly like I had misunderstood. "Not us, June. You. This is Evan's childhood home, his inheritance technically. We thought you might be happier in one of those nice communities. People your age enjoy the activities, the safety, the simplicity." Her words wrapped around me like ice water. People my age. Evan avoided my eyes as he echoed her. "It's just too much for you now. The yard, the roof, the upkeep. You deserve something smaller, easier. Someone your age shouldn't be climbing ladders or worrying about repairs." I sipped my coffee slow and deliberate, because it was the only thing keeping me from breaking. The taste was rich, warm, and it reminded me I was still here, still capable, still myself. My gaze wandered to the doorway where the wood bore pencil marks of Evan's growth each year, carefully recorded by Rob. To the porch where we had watched summer thunderstorms roll over the bay. To the garden out back where my roses climbed the trellis. I hammered with my own hands. Every inch carried my life, but to them, I was just an obstacle to their plans. Sloane leaned in, her tone growing firmer. "It's not fair for us to feel crowded. We want space for our own family. We need this house to reflect who we are." The word family cut deeper than I expected. Hadn't I raised one here already? Hadn't I given everything I had so Evan could feel secure under this roof? I smiled faintly, not because I agreed, but because smiling was the only armor I had left in that moment. Evan reached across the table and touched my hand. "Mom, this is for your own good. You'll thank us one day." His palm was warm, but the words were cold. My heart ached, not from surprise, but from recognition. They had been thinking this for a long time. The bell outside chimed again, soft and insistent, and it felt like Rob was reminding me not to crumble. My phone buzzed. A text from Rita next door asking if I wanted to walk later. Her friendship had been a quiet lifeline since Rob passed. I looked back at Evan and Sloane, both watching me as if waiting for approval of their verdict. I nodded, slowly pushed my coffee cup aside, and whispered that I understood. But inside, something turned. It was not rage, not yet. It was clarity, sharp and undeniable. I saw with new eyes the way they looked at me, not as June, the woman who had built this life, but as a piece of furniture too old for their new decor. When I stood from the table, the chair scraped against the floor with a sound that felt final. They thought they had convinced me that I would shuffle quietly into their plan. What they did not know was that in that moment I began to plan my own. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. I sat in the quiet of my living room on Monday morning, the winter light cutting across the cedar floors Rob had sanded himself. The echo of Evan's words still lingered, but I no longer felt frozen. Instead, I felt focused. By 9 o'clock, I was in the office of Margaret Collins, the lawyer who had helped Rob and me years ago when we drew up estate papers. She adjusted her glasses, pulled out a thick folder, and walked me through each line of the trust. June, you are still the trustee, she explained, her voice calm but precise. This house may be titled in Evan's name, but it sits inside a revocable trust. That means you have authority to manage it, even to sell it. He has no control while you are alive. Her words steadied me like a hand on my back. I thought of the bell on the porch and how Rob used to say it was the voice of the house. It was still my voice to protect. I left Margaret's office with papers tucked under my arm, my shoulders squared against the cold bay air. The next appointment was with Luis Ortega, my financial advisor. He greeted me with the warmth of someone who had watched families stumble and rebuild. We sat across from one another as he opened spreadsheets and charts, the numbers glowing on the screen like a hidden map. Rob planned, well, he said. Between the insurance payout, the sale of his business, and your pension, you are secure. Add the value of the house, and you have freedom. More than enough to start over anywhere you choose. I had lived my life within careful lines, raising Evan, paying bills, stacking books on library shelves. Freedom had not been a word I often claimed. But hearing it now, I let it settle in me like the first sip of strong coffee. Luis handed me a folder of projections. You could live comfortably in Annapolis, or you could live comfortably in Paris if you wanted, he said with a smile. I didn't correct him, but Monaco was already blooming in the back of my mind, a private dream. Rob and I used to whisper on long winter nights. That afternoon, I called Claudia Park, a realtor known for moving homes quickly in our historic district. She arrived in a navy coat tape measure clipped to her belt, eyes sharp. She walked each room with the precision of someone reading a story. Golden hour will make these windows sing, she said in the living room. In the garden, she touched the trellis and nodded. The roses will sell this place as much as the kitchen. Within days, she had the house stage furniture polished, photos taken as the late afternoon sun spilled across the porch. The images captured not just walls, but warmth. When the open house came, I stayed away, choosing to sit with Rita at her kitchen table while Claudia managed the showings. Later that evening, Claudia called with details. The first couple was young, carrying a baby in a car seat, their eyes bright with the hope of filling the house with new beginnings. The second was an investor, cool and brisk, speaking only in square footage and rental yield. But it was the third couple who caught my attention. The Hendersons, in their early 60s, paused at the bell on the porch, listening to its chime like a hymn. They traced the growth marks on the doorway and admired the garden with reverence. Someone loved this home deeply, Claudia quoted them saying. My heart tightened because they had felt it. 2 days later, Claudia placed 3 offers on my table. The investor offered cash at market value. The young couple stretched high but needed financing. The Hendersons wrote a letter with theirs. We promised to care for the roses and ring the bell often, they wrote in careful script. That was enough. I signed with them knowing the spirit of the house would live on. Meanwhile, Evan and Sloan continued their campaign. They drove me one afternoon to Harbor Oaks, the senior facility with manicured lawns and a cheerful brochure. A young manager walked us through bright halls filled with crafts and scheduled dinners. Sloane's tone was breezy. You'll make friends in no time, she said, her eyes already scanning paint samples for the house she planned to strip bare. Evan pressed my hand. Mom, this is right for someone your age. I smiled as if their plan had weight and replied softly, I'll handle my own address. The words hung in the air, final as a closing door. Back home, the kitchen table became my command center. Claudia delivered escrow papers, and I signed them with a steady hand. Margaret confirmed every legal detail, and Luis transferred funds into accounts that would follow me overseas. Each page carried me further from their control and closer to my own life. At night, when the house was quiet, I opened my laptop and began typing in searches I'd once thought were jokes. Cost of living in Monaco, apartments near the harbor, retired expatriate community French Riviera. That was how I found the name Anais Morel. Her profile picture showed a woman with dark hair pulled into a knot, her bio promising expertise in guiding Americans to properties abroad. I drafted an email, my heart racing. I am seeking a new beginning, I wrote. Please tell me about available apartments with a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean. When I hit send, it felt like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. The days that followed passed in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Claudia called to confirm the Hendersons were eager to close within 30 days. Margaret checked in to remind me of timelines. Louise sent updated numbers highlighting in green the freedom I had unlocked. Each signature was a small triumph, each notarized stamp a quiet declaration that I was no longer waiting to be dismissed. At night, the bell on the porch sang with the wind, the same bell Rob had hung when we were young. Soon it would ring for new hands, new laughter, a new family. I was at peace with that. My life was no longer tied to this house. It was tied to the woman who had chosen not to be erased. And as I shut down my laptop each evening, I whispered the name of the city I had not yet seen, but already claimed in my heart. Monaco. The morning of my departure broke cold and clear. I packed slowly, folding a quilt stitched by my grandmother and sliding in her recipe cards worn soft from years of use. Those pieces were not just belongings. They were threads of my life, reminders that even when you start fresh, you carry your history with you. By 8 o'clock, the movers had finished. Rooms once filled with laughter and arguments now echoed with absence. I stood on the porch and wiped the brass bell Rob had hung decades ago. Its shine caught the morning sun, and I let my hand rest there a moment longer, as if saying goodbye to his touch. My suitcase sat by the door, my passport tucked inside my purse. This house had been my entire world, but now it was a chapter I was closing with my own hand. The sound of a car pulling up broke the stillness. Evan and Sloane stepped out, their smiles vanishing as they noticed the stripped-down rooms through the window. Sloane's heels clicked furiously on the walk as she pushed the door open. "Where is everything?" she demanded, her voice sharp with panic. Evan looked at me, his face pale. I handed them 2 envelopes, each one with their names in my careful handwriting. "Read," I said. My voice was steady, calm. Sloane tore hers open, first eyes darting across the page. "You sold it? Escrow closed." Her words tumbled out like broken glass. Evan's hands shook as he read his. "Mom, you can't just do this." I looked at him evenly. I already did. They both started speaking at once. Sloane insisted they had no stability now, no plan. Evan pleaded, saying they had only wanted me comfortable. I let their words wash over me the way waves roll over stone without leaving a mark. "You planned my absence before you planned your own lives," I said. "This house was never meant to be your safety net. It was my home, and I chose how its story ends." A taxi pulled into the driveway right on time. I lifted my suitcase and walked past them. Evan reached out as if to stop me, but his hand fell before it touched mine. Sloane's voice cracked. "Where will you even go?" I paused at the car door, met their stunned faces, and said softly, "I found my own place. In Monaco." The silence that followed was heavier than any protest. As the taxi engine started, Rita came hurrying across the lawn, her scarf flying in the breeze. She pressed a small box into my hands. Inside were recipe cards, Rob's handwriting faded but legible. "You left these with me years ago," she said, her eyes wet. "Take them home with you." I hugged her, whispered my thanks, and promised to call. She waved as the car pulled away, the bell behind her, chiming one last time for me. The airport was a blur of lines and announcements, but I moved through it with a lightness I had not felt in years. On board, I settled into my seat, and accepted the glass of champagne offered by the flight attendant. The bubbles caught the cabin light like stars. I lifted it to my lips and whispered a single word only I could hear. Freedom. 8 hours later, the plane dipped toward the French coast. The water below was impossibly blue, the shoreline glittering like a painting. A driver met me with my name on a sign and carried my bags through winding roads that opened to Monaco, a city gleaming with terraces, yachts, and sunlight. When he unlocked the door to my new apartment, I stepped onto the balcony and drew in the salt air. It filled my lungs with something like rebirth. That evening I called Rita. Her face filled my phone screen warm and familiar. She asked how it felt. I turned my camera toward the harbor, the lights winking against the Mediterranean. The bell will keep singing without me, I told her. But I finally found where I belong. And as the sea stretched before me, I knew every word was true. 3 months after I left, my phone rang one quiet morning in Monaco. Evan's voice was softer than I remembered, and behind it, I could hear the echo of a smaller space. He admitted he was living alone in a modest apartment, the marriage already gone. Sloane had left weeks earlier, returning to her parents, and he spoke with a kind of shame I had never heard from him before. He told me about her past details I'd never known. She grew up in motels, moving constantly, her mother battling untreated illness. Control and image had been her only shields against chaos. Suddenly, her obsession with stability and appearances made more sense. I listened quietly because understanding someone's pain did not erase the harm they caused, but it explained the shape of it. When he asked if we could repair what had been broken, I set my terms as gently as I could. Respect, financial independence, therapy before reconciliation. I told him I could forgive, but I would not step back into old patterns. Mercy without change was not mercy at all. He did not argue. He only whispered that he would try. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived with a return address I did not expect. Inside was one of my grandmother's recipe cards, the handwriting worn from years of use. Sloane had mailed it back with a note that read simply, "I am sorry. I should have valued what I was given." It was not redemption, but it was a beginning. That night, I cooked the beef stew on the card in my Monaco kitchen and invited my neighbors from down the hall. Around my small table, laughter filled the air, and I felt a healing I had not expected. Months passed before Evan came to visit. He was thinner, quieter, humbled in a way life sometimes demands. We walked the coastal path together, the Mediterranean spread wide beside us. He asked if we could start fresh not as mother and dependent child, but as two people learning how to respect each other. We agreed on a new rhythm. Thanksgiving 1 year in his modest apartment, the next in Monaco, where he could sit on my terrace and hear the sea. As I watched him board his return flight, I felt something settle in me. Mercy requires truth. Respect requires change. I had both now, and with them came peace. For the first time in years, I was not carrying the weight of someone else's choices. I was walking into the rest of my life with boundaries intact and love rebuilt on honest ground.